This is Intersection. I'm Matthew Petty. That's the sound of a handpan, and that's Justin Paul with a song called Waiting for December. Justin Paul is an Orlando musician and producer. He creates instrumental hip-hop and ambient sounds, and he plays the handpan, it's a kind of steel drum. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, thank you.
So for our listeners, just describe a little bit about this instrument. What does it look like?
Yeah, so I mean, if you've seen a UFO, a flying saucer, it literally looks exactly just like that. I mean, it looks like two bowls put on top of each other, you know? So it kind of looks like the Caribbean steel drums that you'll see, except instead of a concave bowl-like shape, just stack another one on top of that, and it looks just like that.
Yours is a beautiful blue color. Is there a level of kind of customization in these instruments?
Yeah, there's a little bit, not too crazy. You can't do tie-dye colors like, hippies and stuff, but you do see them in a variety of like red and blues and gold colors even. But you're not going to see, a pink one out there, not as far as I've seen at least.
So when was the first time you first heard a handpan?
The first time I heard one was actually a very popular video on YouTube. And as soon as I heard the sound, I just knew it from that moment. I had to, at some point, acquire one. Had to get one at some point. It took some time. I mean, it wasn't like I could just order it the next day. But after about a year and a half, 2, I was able to get my hands on one. It was love at first sight.
Do people make them themselves as well? Is it like a fairly easy instrument to manufacture?
Easy, not necessarily. That's actually the hardest part in getting one is the creation of it. It is usually made by hand, and it's usually 1 or 2 people that make them. And for one person to make one handpan, it usually takes at least 3 months. So that's just the making process. And so now they have so many orders to fill. Hundreds of people love them as soon as they hear them. So now, after those 3 months, they have to put them out there. It can take up to a year or 2 even to get them.
So where did you get yours from?
So mine's actually from a maker in Canada, and it took me a few years. It took me about 2 years to get one, but it's so worth the wait. So worth the wait.
So it's not the kind of instrument you might see on the shelf in a music store.
Yeah, I've never seen them in a music store. You won't find them in a music store like that. There's a few very select steel makers in certain specialty areas like that, and they'll go ahead and make them and put them in their stores, but they're not on the shelf for long.
How do you play it? Describe what it's like performing on this instrument.
Yeah, so you actually play it with your fingers. I prefer to play with my thumbs just because I come from that percussion background, but you can absolutely play with your fingertips. You don't play with a mallet. You don't play with anything like that because the metal is so thin and so soft that eventually, if you play with a mallet, it will start to bend and change the sound of it. So you are recommended to play with your fingertips, and it's just very lightly tapping it. You're not banging on it like a drum. You're not, hitting it. It's a very light tap, and that's what produces that nice, round, crisp sound,
The songs you perform, they have a very distinctive tone and sound to them, and I imagine that's partly the design of the instrument itself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that really attracted me to the instrument itself is because of the numerous types of scales that the creators actually make. So you can order them in a typical scale, a very, pentatonic basic scale, or they'll have these custom ones that are just, very magical. The one I have is a Celtic D Scale. So if you listen to it, you can almost hear kind of a Celtic Irish kind of accent to it almost. But you can absolutely get some that are more of like a Asian kind of sound, a more Caribbean sound, and you can order them in whatever way you like for the most part.
So why did you decide to go for a Celtic D Scale?
Yeah. When I first heard it, because there's hundreds of scales, and I took the time to listen to at least most of them. And I listened to this one, it was nice. I listened to that one, it was nice. But when I heard the Celtic D one, it was just magical, And all those sounds are going to hit someone differently. So that one might not work for you the same. You might be attracted to a different sound. But that was the one that I just knew that was the sound for me.
Playing it, do you develop calluses on your fingers? Do you have to sort of develop some hand strength and finger strength to play it properly?
A little bit. Not as much as you may think, only because you are playing it very softly. The one thing that you will learn is the rhythm of moving your hands around the bowl of it, the pan, getting that rhythm right, almost like a dance on top of the steel, and that's the most the hardest thing to learn as a beginner is getting that rhythm right. It's very much like a dance on top of it. Finger strength, you don't really need too much of that because you're just slightly tapping it, but yeah, it's mostly that rhythm that comes with it.
Now, because this is kind of a rare instrument, did you have to teach yourself? Did you find a maestro to study with?
No, I actually taught myself. Even with piano and drums, I taught myself. I never had lessons with anything. And that's the good thing about it, is if you're interested in that instrument, it's very easy to pick up. Hard to master, but easy to pick up. And I personally sat in my room or in my house just for about a year, just sitting there practicing it to myself and just learning to hit it the right way, how to really dance across the steel and get that rhythm right.
So, Justin Paul, you've been playing this for about 2 years now. What level of mastery would you say you're at?
Out of 10, I would go ahead and put myself at a 6.5, 7 on a good day. There's still so much more I can learn, from it. And I do practice almost every day with it. So, but there's some people out there that they just blow my mind. I look at videos of them and I'm like, wow, I'm nowhere near that.
This instrument, will you hear it in Caribbean music? You mentioned, the classic steel pan with the concave surface. Where would you hear handpan?
Depending on the type of scale it is, you can absolutely hear it in the Caribbean along with that type of music. A lot of times, because the percussion side of it is actually very light, it's more melody, you'll often hear it paired with like drum sets or a very simple keyboard kind of scale like that. And that's the beauty of it. They have so many different sounds that you can get out of them and things you can mix them with. You'll hear them in hip-hop. You'll hear them in acoustic, just, jazzy kind of settings. I mean, there's so many places you can put a handpan.
Now, you produce some hip-hop and some ambient yourself. Do you incorporate the handpan into that?
Yeah. So I actually just released my first album a while ago, and I'm always working on more music with the handpan now, incorporating that nice atmospheric kind of sound into the more aggressive sides of like hip hop and trap music and instrumental wise. I don't do any rapping or anything like that, but it's just a nice melding, nice atmosphere together.
And where do you perform?
So I just performed a little while ago in Orlando at a art and design event. So now I'm looking towards my next one, and mostly you'll find me actually in Winter Park playing. If you ever stroll down Winter Park on a weekend, you might hear my sounds over there on Park Avenue.
So you mentioned the fact that you have a percussion and piano background as well. How did you get into music in the first place?
I always grew up around music. I was never interested at all. Never. My mom was very R&B, dad very jazz, my brother very rap. I didn't like any of it really. Eventually I started getting into rock music, and from there I got into DJing and producing. And then I kind of heard all these DJs, but they're making instrumental tracks that were very ambient. So I was like, well, I think I can do something like that. That's where my love of music first began, and from there it just kind of took off.
Is there a big audience for ambient music here in Orlando?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a huge production audience here. Plenty of people are into making beats and making their own hip-hop and remixes and things like that. I focus more on the atmospheric sides of the hip-hop and mixing that together, but there's a huge audience here.
Do you have some collaborations in the works? Do you have people approach you and say that they want to collaborate with some of the sounds you're making?
Yeah, I've had, I was actually playing the other day a few weeks ago, and there were some people doing like a rap music video, like just a little bit down the ways. And as I was playing, they came over and they're like, hey, can we rap over your while you're playing? And that was an interesting sound. I won't doubt that. But yeah, I get a lot of feedback.
Okay, so where can people hear you perform next, Justin Paul?
I don't have any upcoming events specifically, but I will always be in Winter Park performing on the weekends. You'll always find me down there playing in the streets and just waiting for my next wave.
Well, Justin Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, thank you.
And to take us out, a song called Sakura Falls. Justin Paul performing a song called Sakura Falls on the handpan. You can find more details and see pictures of Justin performing on the handpan on our website, WMFE.org. Support for Intersection comes from Florida Hospital and from our listeners. Intersection's producer is Brendan Byrne. Our intern is Alana Campbell. The show's executive producer is Catherine Welch. Technical direction from Nicole Darden-Creston. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us online at WMFE.org to listen back to previous episodes of Intersection. And while you're there, consider making a donation and supporting us during the silent pledge drive. You can also make a contribution to local reporting and coverage of current affairs by calling 1-800-785-2020. Thanks for your support and thanks for listening. I'm Matthew Petty.